So we've talked a lot over the years here about how the success of Star Wars Destiny as a game lies in its approachability, and this is true from many, many aspects. One part that continues to dominate and sets it apart from other games is Destiny's ease in identifying compatible pieces. It makes it easy for almost anyone to look at a card pool and identify what can go together. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Star Wars Destiny friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando cast, and happy Destiny Friday on a Saturday. That's right, on a Saturday. Thanks for checking in. We had the major Flesh and Blood spoiler reveal yesterday, so as per normal, I don't like to mix those two things together. It also helps me get the views and the attention and keep the focus on that day. So thank you for your patience, but again, happy Saturday. Now, as you can see behind me, I am on vacation, so I apologize a little bit for the washout and all that, but hey, it is what it is, right? So, and then obviously I don't know how long this chat's going to take. Kind of approach it as a beer chat. So cheers, sit with me, and we'll have a good chat talking about ease of compatibility and its reason that I think that Star Wars Destiny as a game and as a culture a little bit has been so successful over the years, right? And what's made really Destiny stand out from that really good approachability standpoint. And that's bad grammar, but Destiny as a game itself is very approachable. So what do I mean exactly about that in terms of a high degree of compatibility? Well, specifically what I mean is, if you were sitting down, like when a new set releases, right, what do? We go through and we look at, usually you look at the heroes, and that in itself is a good reason to start, right? You start with something in play, and you start with things in play, and those things define your deck, right? So it really starts, it's instead of having to like jump in like another game like Magic or something where you're like, all right, where do I start? I guess I'll just go get a deck list from online, right? That's how a lot of these games go. That's what we see in Flesh and Blood all the time. Even though we have heroes, people are very aggressive about deck lists because they have no idea how to build decks, right? Or when they're new, they have no idea how to build decks. It can be very hard to do it. So it's easier to just go get it online. And obviously that happens to certain degrees in Star Wars Destiny, there's deck techs and all stuff like that. But by and large, anybody can really sit down and say, right, I want to play this character. Who looks like they pair well with this character? And there's a couple points of compatibility there, right? First off, you have 30 points. So if you have a 15-point character, you're going to be looking for another 15-point character or a 7 and an 8, right? However the math works out, right? So you have that starting point. But then your character also does something. Do I want it to be another yellow character? Do I want yellow red? Do I want yellow blue? So you have all of these lines, right? All you need to do is really pick one point in the sand, and you naturally have all these lines that start drawing themselves, whether that be, again, with the points or value or thematically or whatever it may be, right? And again, when I'm talking compatibility, it doesn't have to be just thematic, right? One of the things I use on this channel a lot is that of Reylo, right? Reylo obviously was a fantastic, I still think probably the best thematic deck they ever developed, at least in FFG Destiny days, right? Something like Guy Love is right on top of that in terms of ARH. But it doesn't have to be something like that, right? You can look at it thematically, or you can look at it mechanically, right? There's been many, many, many decks through the years that have worked together mechanically, even though the characters themselves don't necessarily fit together in the universe. Now, there is a little bit of a difference there, right? We've made jokes all the time. It's like, oh yeah, remember that time that Darth Vader and the battle droid walked into battle together? Or remember the time that Darth Vader and Greedo walked into battle together, right? And those have always been long-time jokes, but those do work from a compatibility standpoint, because you're looking like, all right, Vader's a 23-point character. Where am I going to go with this? Well, there's only so many options on how you're going to approach that, right? And I think that is a high degree of compatibility in terms of getting started. I mean, anybody can say, I want to play Darth Vader. Who plays with it? Well, there's like 3 options, right? There's Battle Droid Retribution, there's Faust, and then there's Greedo. How do you want to do it, right? That's very approachable from a deck building standpoint, okay? And sure, we've had stuff through the years, like we made, remember that time that the Ewoks went to Hoth and paired with the Hoth Trooper to win Gen Con, or remember the time that little Anakin, Cassian, and Yoda all get together to mill you to death or whatever. And sure, like any game, right, Destiny has always fallen into the pit trap that us gamers will bastardize the game, trying to match up efficiency and eke out any little thing from the cards that we can. And that's how we end up with the decks like I just referred to. But that's not a bad thing. It's not a bug, it's a feature, right? I mean, that's the point of these games. But I think a lot of the feature, again, of Destiny through the years has been the ability to be very, very approachable to people in terms of being able to go out and pick those teams and have them work together and synergize really well kind of out of the box, right? And I think that has been and continues to be a major asset for Destiny that sets it apart, right? And if you go out and you look at many other games out there, I mean, the big one in the room obviously being Magic. Magic can be very difficult to figure out where your starting point is, and that's why, maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, I'm an old man at this point, could have been before that, but tribal decks started to become very popular in a lot of circles, because when you're looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of cards, you're like, all right, well, I need to go build a popper is what they call it, right? I need to go build a popper deck. Where the hell am I going to start? I guess I'll go look at all the black cards. No, you say, all right, well, I'm going to play a zombie deck, or I'm going to play a merfolk deck, or I'm going to play a goblin deck, or, whatever it might be. And that's really kind of what I'm talking about in terms of the same avenue, is giving people, it doesn't even have to be a new player, right? Giving anyone a place where they can go in and say, okay, I see naturally how these puzzle pieces fit together. And then once you kind of get the framework for that, right, it's kind of like building a puzzle itself, right? Once you kind of get the outside of the puzzle done, you can kind of start working your way in and solve it. And there's a lot of reward that comes to people from being able to go out and do that on their own versus just go on a website and download something. And sure, again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's something perfectly fine with that. But you can't tell me you get a different level, or you can't tell me you don't get a different level of accomplishment by doing one versus the other, right? If you come up with, it doesn't matter if you're the only person in the world that came up with it or not, right? Or if 900 other people, but if you look at it and you're like, you know what? Tarkin and Snoke look like they might go together really well. Well, that looks cool. Well, Mandalorian Maul, Maul and Super Commando, actually, now that I finished Clone Wars, I didn't understand that at the time. Now that I finished Clone Wars, they actually did work together, so fair enough. But you get my point, right? Going and figuring out those puzzle pieces and be like, oh, this is something that I'm proud of. This is something I came up with on my own. And I was able to work the problem and solve it. And there's an inherent win and attachment that comes from doing something like that. And now in terms of the tribal, right, I do want to, know that, Convergence to a certain extent was Destiny's tribal set, right? It was when Trooper came out and Leader came out and all the support for really the subtypes. And I think that was a good thing in of itself, right? You looked at the Phasma deck, again, a very cookie cutter type deck, but that's a good thing, right? It was a good thing because, again, you say, well, I want to play Phasma. If you go back to Awakenings, what were you playing with Phasma? You were playing a First Order. Well, I guess in that case, I guess that did work, right? But it was like, oh, remember that time that Balatik, Phasma, and then a Trooper teamed up together? I mean, I guess Phasma and a Trooper were together. So, and actually they were all in the same universe, so I suppose they could have crossed timelines, I suppose. All right, but, and then when it comes to the next step of that, which is, again, the fact that you form your team and then you build your deck around the team, in of itself, I think also is something that really makes Destiny special. Now, there's a lot of other games where you Flesh and Blood, you choose your hero and you build your deck around your hero. So it's not unique in that aspect. But again, if you have that starting point, right, you can really start to grow and make it yours. And I do want to say, as opposed to the Flesh and Blood example I just used, Destiny is really, really, really very easy to build, like in the grand scheme of things, right? Destiny is really very easy to build decks for. By and large, most of the decks, and this is not actually as much true in the ARH years, I would have to say. And again, that's not a bad thing. That's not a complaint. And I think it's just the sheer number of cards, right? And how they've set up and had, the cards be a lot more usable. Because it used to be like, you think like Way of the Force type days. A lot of it, like in many cases, you're like, I need to run 11 upgrades, and there's like only 14 upgrades that aren't complete garbage, right? So most of the decks would kind of build themselves. You'd kind of get into that like 22, 24 range by the time you went in and got enough removal. You had your hidden motives and your overconfidence. Is that the one? Yeah, anyway, you get my point, right? You go in and you stick in all the good removal. Now you're at like 22, 24 cards, and then you really only have like 4 to 6 slots to do meta calls or tech calls or whatever like that. And that's where people would go out and do the deck techs, because by and large they'd have a shell, and they just kind of needed to know what those last 4 or 6 cards were. Maybe look at cost curves and compare something like that, right? So again, I think that's a really big win historically for Destiny, in how it's really become, it's become, again, it's that approachability. Now, we've talked a lot about, in interviews we've had with many of the ARH leaders over the years, in all of their sets, they try to do some sort of, or at least one, some sort of like canned deck, right? Again, Baze Churret, Guy Love comes to mind. Those canned decks it's almost become a tradition in Star Wars Destiny to have those quote unquote canned decks, because of, I think, that very reason. It's actually ingrained in Destiny's culture. And again, I think that's a very good thing for all of us, right? Because you can come and say, oh, I see that deck right away, and go play it. And then as you get into it, you see other things going on. That's when you can end up on your, 3-wide Aphra, whatever, or your Hoth troopers or whatever they might be. But again, it gives you a place to start. You can branch off and grow as you enjoy the game. So kind of where I want to finish this is, you can clearly see the sun I've clearly hit the edge of my sun for this. But where I wanted to go with this is, ARH, as they go forward, there's no doubt they will continue to do those quote unquote canned decks over time. But I do hope that we can return to, one of the, let me step back, right? One of the pitfalls we saw very early ARH is a lot of keywords, like very specific deck archetypes that were almost too linear. And I think as we've, kind of to my point earlier about how a lot of things are very playable by a lot of different things now, I think you see, like a Whistling Birds or something like that can go in all sorts of decks or something like that, right? So I think that in the later years, ARH has gotten away from necessarily the specific like columns and lines of where things should go, and are starting to branch out. And that's a good thing, but let's not leave behind the canned decks, right? And again, I know you're going to continue to have canned decks, absolutely 100%. So looking forward to that. But I think I'm going to leave it there. Just kind of said my piece, like I said, just a casual piece, something I've been thinking about, that Destiny has really, it really sets Destiny unique compared to a lot of the games out there, is how easy it is to select, identify, and find your starting point and find your home, which then lets you, again, feel proud and set in the game and kind of buy into the game. And then who knows where you'll end up from there. So anyway, hopefully you've let me know your comments, your thoughts below. Thanks for dealing with all of this and being a day late and all that. But you know what? Appreciate you all. If nothing else, go Commando.